Hello, it's Anthony Chadwick from the Webinar Vet, welcoming you to another episode of VETchat. I'm really super pleased to have Vanessa Nicola on the line today, who's a veterinary surgeon at the Wylie Veterinary Centre, the owner of the Wylie Veterinary Centre as well. And Vanessa won our award, Green Practice of the Year, in June of this year, came down to the Camargue. Vanessa is French as well. So there was no problems there coming down, getting to see friends as well. From Montpellier area, so very close to where the awards were. And hugely inspirational for me doing all the things that she's doing. But, as we'll discuss a bit later in the podcast, Vanessa, none of these things are impossible to do, are they?
No, and this is what we've been talking about at the forum quite a lot, is just to try to encourage people to realize that, yes, none of these actions are actually necessarily hard or complicated. It's just getting started. That's the important first step, really. And sometimes it might feel a bit overwhelming, but actually, once we start, we can see the results quite quickly, and it's very rewarding.
Before we sort of dive into those two bits, I'd love to talk first of all, about where you've come from. This interesting history of French veterinarian, now speaking beautiful English and practicing in England as well. So how did that happen? Tell us a little bit about your backstory.
So as you say, I'm originally from Montpellier, so from the south of France, and I did my secondary school in Alsace, in Strasbourg, and then I went on to study veterinary in Belgium. So I qualified in Liège in Belgium, where I met my partner, and then we decided to come and work in the UK. So it seems I'm going more and more north as
Yeah,
which is
you're on a pilgrimage.
yes, soon I'll be with you. So yeah, but so yeah, so basically I qualified in 2001 and I came to the UK straight away and worked in the UK ever since. So at first I worked in Kent, in Canterbury, in a hospital there. Took my certificate in ophthalmology, and then I was clinical director of this practice for quite a few years. This was a practice owned by a corporate, so at some point, I decided it was maybe time for me to leave the corporate world and organize things by myself. So I joined the Wylie in 2018, and yes, and I've been really enjoying it, enjoying the freedom of making decisions, really, and being able to implement things quite quickly, without having to go through layers and layers of decision making
Yes.
people. So yeah, so that's very rewarding, obviously, to be able to say, oh, this will be better if we did it like this, and just being able to action it and see the results straight away. I think it's essential to keep the staff motivated as well, to see that they can participate, they can come with initiative, and then see them actually being actioned. Because I think that's one of the very important points. Is sometimes, when you've got ideas, when you want people to participate, but then they feel that everything is really slow or difficult, then that might be a bit disheartening sometimes. So I think, even the little steps, and I'm not suggesting that this is not possible in the corporate world, but, sometimes you need to focus on what you can achieve. And even if it's only a few things that you have the local power to do, I think it's possible.
And the practice is in the southeast, isn't it?
Yes, so the main hospital is in Upminster, so just on the border of London. And then we have also a wellness center in Brentwood, which is, not far from there, a few miles from there. So in Essex.
How many vets and nurses in the practice?
So we have about 100 staff in total, 24 vets, and I think at the moment 42 nurses. And I think in terms of full-time equivalent, it's about 20 vets.
So it's a big practice. Hence, you were able to put some efforts into the Green Awards, but it was a really fantastic entry that you put in. And, I was really impressed with a number of the areas. You obviously are a big believer in education. So For me, one of the problems is wherever you go, you have bins and you go, well, can I put them in there? What do I need to do to get that waste right? Even with supermarkets. It was interesting. We did, as you probably remember, the survey with Kinetic.
Mhm.
And one of the things that the survey came out with for the Veterinary Green Discussion Forum was that vets are often doing more in their private life than they're doing in their practice. So they are doing actions, but then it kind of all falls down a little bit in practice because unless you know how to do things properly, a recycling bin can be ruined by putting clinical waste in the wrong bin, can't it? So, how have
Yes.
you managed within that conundrum? And I know we're starting off on a kind of slightly more esoteric area, and it's perhaps not the easiest area to sort out, but it is one of
Yeah.
those that comes into my mind. And maybe
Yes.
it's not the first one to start with if you're in practice, but I'd be interested to know how you've managed to.
It is one of the first area that comes to mind. Maybe not always the most important in terms of carbon reduction, but yes,
Yeah,
obviously very important in terms of, just responsibility as well of the waste we produce. So I think the first thing we did is we just reviewed all our bins, and we had contact with some suppliers, some companies, and we sort of changed actually company to have a better options for recycling. Then after that, we did some training. Actually, we did some presentation about what was going where. We even had a quiz after that people had to answer. A few videos sometimes, and funny videos from Pascal, my partner, saying this is where you've been this,
yes,
and then we would just, I mean, just checking. And also, one thing I've done is I've replaced all the bins that were sort of open by bins that you have to press a pedal to lift it. And so, by the fact that you've got three bins in front of you, all with a pedal, you have to stop and think. And so that stops people from just binning in whichever, because they all sort of open to receive
yes,
anything. So we've done that, and I'm not going to say it's not challenging. And sometimes the bins are wrong and they don't get collected the way they should.
yeah.
But we find actually the clinical area is really rightly labeled and everything, and it works quite well. What is more challenging, I'll be honest with you, is the kitchen area where people seems to revert to maybe what they do or they don't do at home. But yeah, so again, we have the food, the cardboard, the plastic, and those are the bits where people sometimes find it a little bit more frustrating.
And sometimes it's difficult with that waste, from the kitchen. You might buy, a couple of cakes and they're cardboard, but there's a plastic top on top. So I've always
Yes,
tended to tear off the plastic top, put
yes,
that in the rubbish bin, and then put the rest of the cardboard in the cardboard bin. And similarly, if you get a pizza for a staff meeting, if
hmm,
that's a very greasy box, it probably shouldn't go into recycling. So these things are,
yeah,
there are the sort of more challenging things. So maybe with Green Awards coming up for the next year, as you say, there's some easy, low hanging fruit. We are a bit, well, the government is kind of obsessing around carbon. And, I'm a great believer, holistically, we've got to do a bit of everything. But it's very, very easy to reduce carbon a bit, isn't it? I mean, you've done it
mm,
amazingly because I think when I looked at your report, you were something like 70 to 80% reduction since 2019. So you've been on this game for a long time. Obviously, the first thing you've got to do is measure your carbon. So in 2019, you must have got out your carbon calculator and worked out to the
yes,
nearest 10%,
yes,
20% what you were at. Talk us through that journey, and
hmm,
perhaps particularly on the first parts, because I know a lot of people probably listening to this probably know what a carbon calculator is, but just those listening, have a think for a second. Have you measured carbon? Because if you
yes.
haven't, the first thing you've got to do is measure the carbon, and that's not so difficult, is it?
No, I mean you have to have some motivation, but I have to I have to give credit to the people who own it. Is that we had at the time a vet called Laya who was really passionate about sustainability, and another one called Marta who took over when Laya left, and then myself. So we had a sort of a team of people that felt really strongly about this. So we kind of thought, what would be the best way to sort of tackle this problem? And we joined the investor in the environment. to sort of help us through the journey of the sustainability. And they were brilliant because they obviously gave us the documents and the sort of support in order to calculate the carbon. Because I think the first time you do it, it's quite a little bit daunting. There's quite a lot to put
Mm,
in, and there's quite a lot to do, to look around your practice, record every electrical device, have an idea of how much water, electricity, gas, everything you consume.
yeah,
And then obviously you have to enter all these into a spreadsheet that is quite a scary spreadsheet. But everything has been broken down and has been sort of calculated for you. So
yeah.
it's all about gathering that information. And I have to say, the first time you do it, there's quite a lot, and it might take a little while, and it's step by step. But once you've got that organized, then you can measure those resources regularly, and you just keep going, really.
Just to butt in for a second, Vanessa, because it also makes me think, obviously you and I think are, I've been an environmentalist. I tell the story about I decided to become a vet when my friend accidentally killed a baby sparrow running around the playground when I was 8. And I think from then, I've always been an environmentalist, and I think you've probably got a similar story. But not everybody is that connected
Yeah.
to the natural world. And there obviously are people who think, well, is this really important, etc., etc. But for me, what that also does, and we perhaps don't talk about it often enough because we're passionate about it anyway, but of course, immediately you've gone through that exercise, and obviously over this period of 6-7 years, you've actually reduced your carbon by 74%. I have the feeling that you will have saved quite a lot of money in that time as well, because your
Yes.
electricity bills have gone down,
Mm-hmm.
gas bills have probably gone down. You've
Yes.
probably got rid of appliances that were really heavy on energy when the time was right, and you've replaced
Yeah.
them with lower energy devices. So
Yeah.
this is really, for those who perhaps aren't quite as passionate about it as you and I are,
Mm-hmm.
it's a money saving venture.
Absolutely.
And with practices, struggling sometimes to make a profit, this can really help with
Yes.
that as well, can't it?
Yes. And we've been surprised along the way. I mean, there are areas where we've made investments. So, for example, we bought a really a big autoclave to be able to, autoclave everything in one go rather than have to
Yeah,
have 10 cycles, and, one that is connected to the water pipe, so we don't have to buy these big plastic bottles of water anymore. So that was an investment. We
yes,
bought also the theater kit boxes.
yeah,
That
stainless
was a
steel boxes.
significant investment. So I think altogether, we must have spent about £30,000 in all this. However, now we're saving in water, we're saving in energy, we're saving in all those pouches that we're not using, and so on. So I think sometimes it's also having a little bit more of a long-term vision, and seeing that, yes, okay, I've got a cost right now, but I'm saving along the line. Also, it's not having preconceived ideas. So, for example, when we looked around for an energy supplier to try to see if we could find a greener one, which obviously we did, and actually by going for a greener supplier, we saved £14,000 a year. So it's not always more expensive. And I think people sometimes are prejudiced, thinking, oh, if it's green, it's going to be more expensive.
Yeah,
We also did a lot of work on removing the single-use object, things we were using. So again, for example, Inco pads. That is something in the vet industry that is used in absolutely astronomical quantities.
yes,
And we just said, okay, we're just going to stop. And we stopped completely. And we're now using, towels. And it's a really good example that historically we've been used to put a dog in a kennel with, an Inco pad and then a vet bed and then a dog. And you kind of think, well, the vet bed is there and it's designed to be absorbent. Why are you putting an Inco pad underneath? And it's
yeah,
just old habits that you need to sort of
yes.
break. So we've sort of removed this Incopan. I'm not going to lie, the nurses were not impressed with me for a couple of months, and I said, "If yeah,
Your
okay, we
name was
try."
Mud. You were
Yes,
talked about behind your back, Vanessa,
oh
probably.
yes, I'm sure my ears were ringing, and but I said, let's try for
Yes,
3 months, and then we'll review it, and then 3 months later. we didn't even review it because everybody had forgotten that
So
Inco pad
it saved
existed.
money on the Inco pads,
Yeah.
but it also saved money on the disposal of the Inco pads as well,
Yes. And
because
waste.
presumably a lot of that was going into clinical waste because you weren't sure
Expensive.
about
Yes.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, it's expensive to dispose of, isn't it?
Yes, very much so. I mean, every bag is like, 5, 6, 7 pounds or whatever, and yeah, it's you get into a virtual circle very quickly,
Yes.
and you actually everybody feels quite good for it. Once you said, well, actually,
Mm.
doing this saved us that many tons of plastic, or another area we looked at was to change the cleaning product we were using. So, very simply, the washing liquid for the washing machine, we just stopped using them in plastic bottles, and instead we ordered some that were like in cardboard boxes or as a sheet, and that immediately removed, use of a lot of water, a lot of plastic, and also in deliveries. So
Yeah. And
you very quickly.
potentially all those detergents are going into the river. I've just seen there's a big court case going up against some of the chicken farmers and the water people in the Wye Valley because people are saying this river is now, disgusting. Nothing's living in it. We don't want to swim in it. And obviously it's affecting tourism. So
Yes.
it's saving money there, but it's also helping other people, to carry on with their businesses because, I remember swimming in the River probably 20 years ago, and I believe a lot of people now, just really won't swim in it because they get sick if they do. So there's also this kind of we don't really count the cost for nature, do we? Nature gives us everything for free, basically. And I think now starting to see a change where we say, well, actually, if you run a business, you are taking something away from nature. So maybe you need to give something back to try and even that thing that you're doing, in your business.
And it seems quite ironic that as a profession, we're here to, treat animals,
Yeah,
look after the biodiversity, and at the same time, we're hurting the environment quite significantly with some of those processes. So it's good to have a look. And as you say, think about how much disinfectant we use and how we dispose of it, and the areas where maybe we can use less. So
yeah,
simple things. And I think as scientific mind, once you're exposed with the evidence and you say, oh, this becomes a challenge, and we're very task orientated, are we, as vets or nurses? So when suddenly you say, oh, how could we put less liquid detergent or disinfectant in the drains, then suddenly you discover that actually doing your asepsia in a dry form is actually more efficient, but also it reduces the waste and so on and so on. So then it's kind of good. In Wiley's, we've got a very structured team. So the nurses are organized, and they are in each area a head of area, and so that person is responsible for, let's say, the theater or the hospital or the procedure area. And so it was just beautiful to see each of them sort of embrace the sustainability journey, and to look in their area what it was they could do. And so they came up with lots and lots of ideas which were absolutely brilliant. And just keeping updated as
yes,
what is the latest sort of thing they could do in that domain as well. Because I think as a profession, we have a tendency to believe that the more you do or the more you use and everything disposable, and the better your standard is. And actually, it was just stepping back from that and saying, actually, do I need to use that many disposable things? Is there really a difference between my fabric drape and my
yes.
disposable drape?
And the work has been done on that as well,
Yes,
Vanessa, by
absolutely.
Zoe, by
Yeah,
Nicola's repeated it,
yeah.
this year as well. We kind of know, even if you factor in all the washing machine and all
Mhm.
that sort of thing, that I think the one exception Zoe used was if there's a dog or a cat that you're operating on where there's a lot of fluid around, maybe something like, splenic tumor where there may be lots of fluid, sometimes obviously you've got to change drapes and maybe using a disposable one there is the right thing. But
Sometimes,
for,
yeah.
a routine spay, a reusable drape is very, very
Pretty
adequate.
fine.
And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I was at Vet Sustain ran an event at the new Royal College building, which is beautiful, by the way. So if those of you who are in the area, do go in and listen. Do go in and have a look, because it's actually it has some member areas. So I know
Okay.
you're a bit closer than I am, Vanessa. So pop in and
Mhm.
have a chat with them. But Lindsay Hooper was there, who's the head of the Cambridge Sustainable Leadership Institute, and she was saying exactly what you were saying before. About us we should be leading in this whole area for other industries, because we are respected as an industry, and I think, and as professional body and as professionals. And if we're coming up with things that we help other businesses to do, that raises our profile also with our pet owners.
Mhm.
So again, we've talked about, you've saved money with all of these things, but I'm sure when people go into your practice, clients, there's pretty good evidence of some of the things you're doing. And I'm sure people who are bothered about the environment are probably more likely to go to your practice than somewhere that doesn't really seem to have been set up to think about those things yet.
Yes, I hope so. And I mean, certainly we try to communicate about it. One of our latest project is to tackle the overuse of anti-parasite drugs. So this
Yeah,
is something now we talk more and more with the clients into saying, okay, let's look at the lifestyle of your pet. Do we need to treat him or her so often, and so on? And once actually we tell them about the environmental impact, my experience is that the clients are very interested and very engaged into wanting to do the right thing. So I think that's another subject where, as a profession, we really need to be open and transparent, and also to make people understand that life without a risk is not a reality.
yeah,
And I think we were trying to sell that for many years. Free your dog every month and do all these things, and everything will be fine. And actually, I'm not sure it's true. And at the same time, it's not the right thing for the environment. So we just have to have a more balanced approach and maybe include them more in the decision making of these risk
yeah.
tackling. You know.
As I say, this meeting last week was also interesting. Obviously, I'm not in practice anymore, but and I can't remember who told me it. So if you're listening, apologies for not giving you the credit for it. But the amount of water we use just prepping up for an operation, we wash our
Mhm.
hands, etc., etc. I think it was 20 liters. I might be wrong with that, but it was a big number. And if you're doing that 6 or 7 times a day, it adds up to a lot of water. Whereas now using, obviously a thorough clean at the beginning of the day, but then using antiseptic hand, preparations allows you to carry on. Obviously, your hands are very dirty; you've got to clean them up. But allows you to carry on without that concomitant water usage, which is just another way of improving. And this is where, and it kind of came home to me, as you know, because you were there this year, we run the Veterinary Green Discussion Forum for the last 4 years, going back close to your neck of the woods next year, 2nd and 4th of June. You learn so much by being in a group of people, because there is no way I'm going to know everything about environmentalism. Correct me if
Absolutely.
I'm wrong, but I suspect you're the same as well, Vanessa. So by being in a group, one, we learn from each other, but it also helps to enthuse us to carry on with what we're trying to do, doesn't it?
Yes, I think there were so many positives from this meeting. And I mean, obviously, I was in a very privileged position because I could speak French as well. So, I could meet up with the French people there. And we've made some wonderful connections, and, having so many meaningful discussions. And actually, I need to tell you this because I've not told you yet, but from that, I've now been in touch with some French vets. And there was a gentleman that was there at the forum who actually his job is to promote sustainability, and is kind of the French version of the investor in environment, but
Yes.
and is trying to get the practices to go on the sustainability journey and calculate their carbon footprint. And he's got a wonderful carbon footprint website, very intuitive. Anyway, we now have this discussion where a few heads of French practices that are in similar situations than me, and we've joined up. We've had a few Zoom meeting where we shared sort of
Yeah.
what we're doing, or what, and I've had lots of wonderful ideas from them. And we have
Yes.
this WhatsApp group, so we say, oh, look, this is what I found. this steam cleaning machine that allows you to use less water, or no disinfectant, and look at this, and this practice is using it, and that's the experience. I just think it's wonderful because
It's knowledge sharing, isn't it?
yes, it's sharing, and actually there are different legislation, different approach in different countries, and we can learn from each other. And France has got some very strong points on sustainability in certain areas, and the UK has in other areas. So this sharing has been just brilliant, and
Yeah.
it keeps us motivated as well, as you say, because sometimes, I mean, I see it now with the carbon footprint. At first, we had a dramatic decrease, and now, after a few years, understandably, we see a plateau. So I thought it was really good to sort of, meet up with other people, having those discussions, and really keeping motivated. Because also to keep the enthusiasm and keep the team on board, it's quite important to see that there's still little achievement to be made.
Yes.
Because at first, the beginning might be perceived as a little bit painful, and then people see the drop and they're like, oh, it was worth it. And now we're a little bit more into keeping the carbon footprint where it is,
Yeah.
making sure it doesn't go back up, and plateauing. But that in itself is actually a big achievement when you consider you've got an increased business. We've had all these COVID pets, and so on and so on. So yes, it's also not underestimating the achievement, really, and not expecting to achieve a 2/3 reduction every year, because that's just not going to be
Yeah.
possible.
I think, Vanessa, where you're saying, and you've done amazingly, and obviously I can see how people will go, oh gosh, she's amazing, but could we do that? But I think the point you've made is go for those low hanging fruits. I presume, for example, you've got LED lighting, that is a massive thing.
Yeah.
If you can decarbonize, with even the way you're cooking, you've got a small kitchen with that many staff, you have an induction hob rather than a gas fire. These are areas that you can make a difference on. And of course, for me, one of the big ones now is because the government is so keen on this, and I have a few reservations because I think they're not necessarily then taking biodiversity seriously, but they are doing a lot on net zero. The actual national grid is decarbonising, so just because of what the government is doing, that is making the job of businesses getting to net zero. It's going to be easier than if they were doing nothing.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, as we said earlier, I think it's focusing on the action with the biggest impact. So, you
Yeah,
know, you're right. I think following there are some bits where you feel a bit discouraged, it's going to be hard to tackle. One of them for us is the travel. It's very
yeah,
difficult to convince people to cycle to work, or, share their cars and so on. That's something that people are still very attached on. But I think those are maybe actions that are out of our hands. Ultimately, through the governmental actions, eventually we will all probably have an electric car, simply because we won't have much other
yeah,
choices. So I kind of think, well, I'm not going to work so hard on that bit. But for example, the anesthesia, that's something I can really tackle. That's something that's also, a challenge for the vets and the
yeah.
nurses that they enjoy. So let's focus on the things that can have a big impact and we can enjoy as a challenge and as an improvement to our clinical standards. So I think that's one area where we did a lot.
Yeah, Vanessa, just to finish, it made my heart swell when you were talking about, the connections that you've made in France, because obviously we've set this up at Webinar Vet 4 or 5 years ago. And for me, it was about creating those connections, of creating, a community of people who I don't need to be at the center of that at all, that people are talking, that there are connections being made. And, you're not the only kind of story I've heard about that. Obviously, we're going to France again, and it was lovely this June, or June just gone, that there was a real international feeling to the meeting, because the meeting for the first 3 years, 2 years at Brockholes in Preston, last year at the London Wetlands Centre in Barnes, it was a very British meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, this isn't a British problem; it's a worldwide problem, but it's certainly a European problem. I think tackling it in different ways in different areas. So please, please, please encourage them to come to our event 2nd and 4th of June. And obviously, anybody who's been piqued by this is interested in it. The two things that we try and do as Webinar Vet around education is our Sustainability Summit. And I think we'll have to get you on that as well, Vanessa, because you're a superstar. That's in February and that's online. And that's really, it's a free event to just encourage people. Because I think also there are a number of people out there who think basically the planet is screwed. There's actually no point in actually changing behavior because we're too far gone. And either eat, drink, and be merry because tomorrow we die, or stick your
Okay.
head under the duvet and don't get out again, and there's this kind of
Yeah,
depression, this solastalgia that we've mentioned in the past. And I get the feeling like you're a person of hope and you believe that the ship can be turned around. And I think this is what we try and do at both events is encourage people that we can have a huge impact in this, not only in our own veterinary industry, but across industries because of our unique positioning, as lovers of the planet, people and animals. I think we're in a really good position to encourage people to do the right thing, but also increasingly becoming the right thing financially as well.
absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, we are professionals. We're used to have to behave professionally in all sorts of domain. And I think that's just one more that we just need to include in
Yeah.
our professional aspect.
Vanessa, thank you so much. You are a real inspiration to me. I've loved speaking to you. I love meeting you in June. I hope we, as Vera Lynn would say, we will meet again.
Sure.
No, don't know where, don't know when, but I'm hoping it's June in the Camargue.
I'm sure it will happen again. Yes.
So yeah, really thank you for all the work that you're doing, and I hope people listening will also be as enthused as much as I've been by the possibilities that you've shown. And congratulations on the award as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anthony. Thank you for the award and the opportunity to go in the South. It was a brilliant opportunity. And also, I'm just happy for people to contact me or to discuss these things as always. And I'm sure we will be talking again.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. Thanks everyone for listening. Hope you've enjoyed it. Hopefully see you on a podcast or a webinar very soon. Take care.